Well, good evening, folks, or morning, whichever time zone you may be in at the moment. We got something a little different for you today. You know, I've had a few people ask me why we title this Dogs and Other Heroes, right? So rather than binge or talking about why we do that, I thought I might just show you what we mean by other heroes. You know, we sort of like to look at most of the animal world and be in awe of what nature's endowed them with, the brains that I think we often underestimate, and the many ways that they've served humans over the years. You know, there's nothing like war to bring out not only the worst but the best of people and animals. And the dogs and the K9 corps that we've seen since World War II in this country and World War I in Europe have certainly proven that out. So I got to looking and thinking, you know, there's got to be something else. And I run across the story of, this was a Polish name, Wojciech. Wojciech was a member of the Polish Second Army Artillery Supply Company. He was proved himself valuable in one of the biggest battles in Italy. The Polish Second Corps was assigned to help with the reinvasion of Italy to stop the fascists and Mussolini there. And of course, in an artillery supply company, that's just what it means, because you have, at that time, you had all your main munitions back away from the front lines. Your big guns were up shooting, and the artillery supply people would take these big, huge shells and deliver them to the guns up front, stack them on a wagon, bring them up, unstack them, back and forth, back and forth. So Wojciech has got an interesting story. He was found as a cub in April of 1942, I believe. He was 6-7 months old. Apparently his mother had been shot by a hunter, and he'd been left on his own. He was actually in Iran. He was a Siberian brown bear, or Syrian brown bear. And, you know, they don't get as big as a grizzly, but they're still bears. But he's a cub, and this one little kid had taken him, Iranian kid was taking him, and he was noticed by one of the civilians getting on the troop train, or the train carrying the troops, and she picked the cub up and sort of nursed and fooled with him. She was the niece of one of the Polish generals and was pretty close to the men that were being shipped. So they all got to fooling with this little cub, and they sort of, you know, took a little shine to him. He had trouble swallowing, and so they kind of improvised, as men will do with most anything they got to fool with. And fortunately for those men, there was a woman around to show them how to make sure they got it right and didn't choke the little fella. So they fixed up condensed milk, honey, fruit, and they put it in a empty vodka bottle, and that's what they fed him, because he did have trouble swallowing. The fruits, the honey, the milk, and all these things mixed together. And then for dessert, a lot of times he'd get a beer, which he developed a taste for. And in fact, as he grew older, beer became his favorite drink. And the big reward, like, you know, we can give our dogs a liver treat. Well, he got a mug of beer when he did something right. So the bear, he grew up, and he just literally became adopted by this Second Artillery Supply Company, sort of like a mascot. They found that they couldn't get food or rations for him, so they were being shipped from where their training grounds were. I forget where. I think it was it was in Iran, and they were shipping from there to Italy to begin the invasion. At this point, Wojciech is a full-grown bear. He's grown that much, probably weighed 250 pounds. But he'd become everybody's favorite. He was quite the character. They taught him to stand up on his hind legs and march with the soldiers when they were in formation. He'd march beside them. If an officer came by, they trained him to salute. He, if one of the soldiers was really cold at night when they go to sleep, they'd holler at him, and he'd come curl up in bed with them, keep them warm for the night. So that's the bearskin rug that even Buffalo Bill never had the privilege of. So, he just was a great little guy. He had his quirks, and he was a teenager. I'm assuming teenager at that age. So he started, doing things like teenage boys will do. Of course, he liked his beer. He also had a fondness for cigarettes. He would smoke them or eat them, either one. He didn't care. But again, I digress here. So they're loading up. They got their orders. They're being shipped to Italy, or to deploy into Italy. And the second is got their ship. They're lined up, but it was on I forget, I think it was a British ship. I'm not real sure, but whatever country it was shipping them. Hold on, I'll tell you here in a minute. Yep, it's British 8th Army, and they were going into that Italian campaign. So they had rules: no pets, no mascots, because a lot of Army units, like with Judy that we talked about earlier, most amazing dog war story I've ever heard, a lot of the units would have pets as mascots, and so this freighter had rules against pets or mascots. So to solve the problem, the Polish boys enlisted Wojtek in the Polish army, gave him the rank of private, got his own little paybook, and he was set to go. They loaded him on the ship, deployed in Italy, and he quickly picked up. Dogs are closely related biologically to bears, and bears are, I'm sure you've seen pictures of them sneaking into people's houses and everything else. They're pretty intelligent critters. Wojtek was no exception. He loved the people. He was really part of the company, and he would pick up the movements and the actions that the soldiers would be involved in, and learn from them. They started into the campaign, into the war, and like I said, they had these canisters of shells that the men were responsible for loading onto trucks, which would take them to the front lines where someone would unload them. They'd come back, and Wojtek watched the men loading these shells, which were 100-pounders, I believe, something like that. And they would load, they'd bring four shells to a box, like this. And they would pick up a shell and put it in, pick up a shell, and Wojtek watched them walk over. He watched them for a little while, and then he walked over and started picking up the whole crate. Walked over, set it on the truck, went back, got another, and he spent it was a 2 or 3 day battle. He stood side by side with those men, doing the work of 4 men, hauling those shells to the truck, to the carriers to get them up front for the guns. So he more than paid back for all the honey and beer he drank. He went through the entire campaign with the 2nd Polish Corps, but at the end of the army, of course, you can bring your K9 home, let him be part of the family. Not so much a bear. That was another story. So he ended up, they found I think it was Edinburgh Zoo, and they retired him there. He had his own big stretch of land, and he became just a favorite of everybody. He was featured on British television. They did they did magazine stories about him. The BBC went out and did radio programs about him on a regular basis. They had a monthly check-in with Wojtek show. Every now and then, some of the guys from the army, they would be in the area. They would come by and holler at him and throw him cigarettes. And they said every now and then they were happening to find a beer can or two scattered around a beer bottle in those days, scattered around on the grounds of the zoo. So he lived a real nice life in retirement. I think he lived to be like 20-something years old, 22 years old, and quite the hit. There was statues, monuments made to him. He really became a part of the lore of World War II and the Polish and the English armies and the boys who invaded Italy. So there's statues about him in Poland. There's statues of him in England at parks and zoos. If you just check out Wojtek, and it's Wotjek, if anyone's curious, he was quite the character and quite proof of the ability of animals to help humans if we humans will get our ego out of the way and let them. And sometimes we're a little looking down our noses at them. We shouldn't be. But that's what we mean when we say dogs and other heroes. If you know of any hero you'd like us to look into, just let us know. If it's, as long as it's got 4 feet in fur, we'll be sure glad to check into it. Or feathers and bird, a beak. We'll check into it if they've done something heroic. I do want to mention on the podcast Thursday night, 6 o'clock, YouTube, Capel K9 channel, and this time we're going to do something. I did a while back. I've relied on my silent whistle ever since I had my guard dog company. I used it because of the ability for a dog to hear it from great distances. So if a thief comes along, starts cutting a fence, every now and then they'd go to cutting, and then the dogs would hear them. They'd run to the fence. The guy would take one look at that Rottweiler or Doberman, staring him in the eye, and they'd leave the scene. Unfortunately, there'd be a hole still in the fence. And some of these dogs were prone to roam, to go out and check stuff out. And I'd show up the next morning to get my, $1,000 guard dog, and he wouldn't be there. So spent a lot of time driving around, whistling, screaming, hollering. And I had some friends in the Panhandle who used silent whistles a lot when they were moving sheep. So I was familiar with the whistle. I'd used it a lot, and I realized the great distances that it can be heard. And so I picked up a silent whistle, and we started teaching our dogs to come to that whistle. That way, if we got to a site where the dogs had gotten out of the fence, we would just stand in one place and blow the whistle. We'd wait a little bit, then we'd drive down to, a half mile down, a block down, blow the whistle. And we'd never get far from the gate where the dog was supposed to be picked up at. And I can honestly tell you that over the next, 8-10 years, we never lost another dog. They were never so far away that even in an urban setting, they couldn't hear that whistle and know that meant time to go. So anyway, we did that. I did a video on those years ago, a couple of years ago when we first started YouTube. And it's just blown me away. It's the second or third most popular training video that we've ever done. And I get pretty regular questions about it. So it dawned on me, Scott and I were talking the other day, trying to come up with a good topic that would be helpful and be interesting to everybody for our podcast. And, one of the biggest complaints people have is my dog won't come when I call him. Or my dog won't listen at all when he's off leash and there's distractions. So how do I fix that? And there's a lot of long distance training tools available out there. There's long lines, there's retractable long lines, there's e-collars, there's all sorts of things. Over the years, I've come to rely on the silent whistle. And so we thought we might do on tomorrow night is talk about silent whistles. And all these other tools that are used to get dogs to respond to you, even with distractions, when they're a long distance away. There's some little tricks and things I've never seen anyone talk about that we learned in the guard dog business that we'll share with you guys tomorrow, or folks tomorrow, ladies. And hopefully it'll help everybody get a little better relationship with their dog. So check with us tomorrow. Check out the bear, the combat bear, we'll call him, and myself and Scott will see you then, and we'll be back with another hero next week. So we'll see you folks in. Thanks.